Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Happy holidays, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about the original Walton Christmas movie, The Homecoming, from 1972, written by Earl Hamner Jr. and directed by Fielder Cook. We filmed The Homecoming in October and November of 1971, and it aired in December of 1971. We filmed all of the interior sets at CBS Studios in Studio City, California, and all of those snow exterior sequences were filmed in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This opening sequence, when you see us all tromping through the snow, that was quite something. That was pretty deep snow, and we had to do it a few times to get that long shot. And then, of course, you see us just forever walking from the barn back all the way to that house. We never did arrive at the house, and we never actually went into that house. I have no idea whose house that was. And we did just sort of turn the corner with that cow, and we never actually made it all the way into the barn either. But we did have some fun. They had to shoot the long shots, and then they had to get closer. So you see each one of us go by, and that is your first introduction to the original Walton children. You can tell we went from exterior locations to interior because as you turn this corner to the barn, you can see that outside that barn door, there is snow all over the ground. But as soon as you come to the interior and you see us enter that barn from that interior soundstage set, you see that outside is not snow, but is hay or straw on the ground. That was what they could do because we didn't have all that snow on the soundstage. I loved the way they really created the era in this original movie, from the cinematography, which had sort of a darker, grittier feel to it, as if it really was hard times, even more so than during the series. And I'm sure that was intentional. Plus, we had the wonderful gift of shooting on 35mm film, which is a much warmer and richer look than today's shows, which are frequently shot on digital format. So in this case, we are also, when we are at lunch, I love these wooden bowls that we are eating soup out of, and lunch consists of vegetable soup and bread. So a very simple meal. Which would be, I'm sure, very appropriate for that time period, and probably the type of lunch that Earl Hamner's real family had during the time that he was growing up. We've had questions at times about exactly how many brothers did John Walton have. His brother Ben is mentioned, and at one point, Grandma makes mention of, I believe, 3 boys that she gave birth to, and in The Homecoming, she makes mention of all my boys were handsome, which would imply more than 2, because I think all, if you were going to just refer to 2 children, I think you'd say both my boys were handsome as opposed to all my boys were handsome. What do you think? So there may be some unaccounted for siblings, even from John Walton. The walnut cracking scene. This was the scene that we used when we auditioned for The Homecoming, when the casting director and the director and the producers and Earl Hamner brought us all in to audition. And they brought together a group of 6 children at a time and had us read this scene together. And over the course of the 3 auditions that I had before I was cast as Mary Ellen, each time I came in, and this was a scene that we read. I read it with various different other young actors who were auditioning for the roles of the other siblings. I don't think we ever read with anyone reading for John Boy because Richard Thomas had already been cast. So I was very familiar with this scene before we shot it. But an interesting thing that I do recall was at the point that Mary Ellen jumps up and starts circling around, very indignant and stomping around and talking about how small Walton's Mountain is, and it's just a tiny speck. All of that, when they were shooting it where you can see me circling, I'm kind of moving along a bit. When they went in for the close-up, because it was harder for the camera to turn quickly, they asked me to really slow down, which felt very awkward to me at the time. And I wanted to argue with that, like, no, this feels stupid to go this slowly. But of course I did it because that was the direction I was being given, and tried to play it as if I was really stomping. And of course, when I see the final the final shot here. It makes perfect sense. If I had been going faster, the camera work just would not have been able to keep up with me. So those were early lessons that I learned as an actor. I love all of the sibling relationships that were established in The Homecoming. Very early on, you see the relationship between John Boy and Mary Ellen, and we do squabble throughout this. We share a lot of looks at times, and gives me a hard time a lot. But there's also quite a relationship there when he advises me about, when I question him about boys and about his relationship with girls, and has he kissed many girls. And I thought it was a lovely relationship between the two of them. And of course, the relationship between Elizabeth and Jim Bob was just adorable, which, again, those were the two youngest siblings in the family. So it made sense that, being closest in age, that they would gravitate to each other because they would feel the most in common relative to where they were in their lives. And Jim Bob gives Elizabeth all kinds of wonderful advice from his advanced years of about, I think he was supposed to be about 7 or 8 at that point, but just so sweet. And then, of course, there was a different relationship between Mary Ellen and Aaron. Aaron is the tattletale, and Mary McDonough was just so brilliant, as were all of them. Cammie as Elizabeth was just, you just wanted to, pick her up and hug her. So I loved how indignant Mary was as Aaron when she is offended by what Mary Ellen's saying, and she's the tattletale and she wants everything just so, and just a wonderful sister-to-sister relationship there as well. And then, of course, the boys had their own relationship there, but all was, I thought, built so lovely throughout this TV movie. I love the introduction of Hawthorne Dooley, the Reverend, played by the brilliant Cleavon Little. He brought so much joy and exuberance to the character of Reverend Hawthorne. And I love Olivia's relationship with the people in the community. She clearly knows all of these people. She speaks personally to his son, Cloudy, and his relationship with the Walton children. And then she admonishes Hawthorne a bit about the fact that he's working for the Baldwin sisters. And yet it, again, is reflective of the time, because he's a reverend. He's not making a lot of money during this depression and is having to take work where he can get it, even though it means working for the Baldwin sisters. So we right away establish the Baldwin sisters and this recipe that they don't know is whiskey, and that everybody else knows, and Olivia's disapproval of that, and yet other people's opinions. So we get an awful lot of information there. And then, of course, Olivia goes into Ike's store, and she has a wonderful relationship with Ike. And Ike is trying really hard to sell her on this doll for Elizabeth. But we find out how firmly Olivia and the Waltons stand about charity and about not accepting credit and about paying their way. So you get all of these layers of who these people were and what strong convictions they had. And yet here are the Baldwin sisters just being as adorable as can be. And that dynamic was brilliant from day one, because, of course, Earl crafted these characters and he knew who they were in his mind and just brought them to life so fully. And here the Baldwin sisters are saying that they need help from John. And although Olivia may not approve of them making bootleg whiskey, she is never rude to them. She's still very kind and polite to them, and she does say that she will pass along to John that they potentially need his help to fix that recipe machine, which she does not approve of. We also right away establish the character of Ep Bridges, played by David Huddleston, who you may recall from the episode The Literary Man, where he played A.J. Covington. So it was great to initially work with David in The Homecoming, and he was up there on location with us, which was a lot of fun. And in this case, the dynamic between the sheriff and Ike, I love how adept the actor was who played Ike when he's slicing the bologna and the cheese and tossing it onto the scale to weigh it. And I totally bought him as this shopkeeper. And yet the whole time, I thought what Fielder Cook did here in terms of some of the shot choices, here he has basically just a 2-shot. It's all being played in one shot, basically. And because Ike is facing forward, you can see him and you can also see Epp throughout the scene. So there doesn't have to be a lot of cutting back and forth between wider shots and close-ups and things like that. The whole scene plays, and yet you get to see Ike's reactions to what Epp is saying about this person who is stealing turkeys and other produce from stores and then passing it along to families in need, and that he is determined to capture this person. And when he makes a comment about wondering and thinking it's interesting that Ike's store has never been robbed, and that perhaps that's because Ike knows who this person is, you get to see Ike's reaction to that because he's not facing Epp. So I thought very, very clever in the staging that Fielder Cook crafted here. Not too long after that, we do get an introduction to the character of Charlie Snead, played by the fabulous William Windom. William Windom was so much fun to work with, and I'm only sorry that he never had an opportunity to come and do an episode of The Waltons, as Cleavon Little did and David Huddleston did, but I always enjoyed him. He really was a lot of fun, and I loved the character of Charlie. He was irreverent and a bit of a bad boy, but you couldn't help but like him and what he was trying to do in helping families during this difficult time, and the sense of humor. Earl found wonderful ways to bring humor into this tension-filled story of a family worried about their father, about the husband, about the son, and the potential danger and the hard times, and yet it was woven through with love and heart and humor, and Charlie Snead was a character that really brought a lot of that forth, which I thought was wonderful.
It's Charlie Snead.
Great, Dana, morning.
Come on in, Charlie.
I usually get a big welcome around here.
The scene decorating the Christmas tree was another one of my favorite scenes, and it took us quite a while to shoot all this because there was a lot of pieces to this. And when we're all standing there waiting and hoping that the lights are going to come on, I have some fun behind the scenes shots that were taken by the official photographer for the TV movie that I have, which I really like. And then a few more candid ones of some of us standing around waiting. You see me here kind of leaning on Eric. I love this shot. And then this was how we ended up shooting all of those publicity shots that you see like on the cover, was all of us in front of that Christmas tree, which was just so special. So I see this scene, and of course the famous bird nest. I think it's very interesting that I put this bird nest on there, and then of course I have the little squabble with Elizabeth and Aaron and call them pissants, which of course sends Aaron off running. And the most precious moment when Olivia, who was very nonchalant about all of it,
She said we were pissants.
Well, you know better than that, don't you, Elizabeth?
I don't feel like a pissant.
There, you see.
without a clue what a pissant even was particularly. But just brilliant moments there. But then I think it's very interesting that as they're talking about the bird nest and Olivia comes over to look at it, that she says, oh, this bird's nest looks real natural there. And yet she pulls it off the tree. I'm like, wait a minute. Why aren't you looking at it on the tree? I keep thinking, I've never had a bird's nest, and I've never had one I've put on a Christmas tree. But perhaps one of these years, I will put a bird's nest on my very own Christmas tree. Since The Homecoming is a 2-hour movie, and there's so much that I want to cover and share with you about it, I'm going to do it in 2 parts. So that's what I have for you for part 1 of my look back at The Homecoming. And I will be back next time with more about the filming of The Homecoming and some of the behind the scenes of the actual shooting, things that went on off camera and the time that we spent together filming, particularly in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So join me next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons. Thanks for watching.